top stories, Russia says it is not optimistic about the extension of a nuclear arms control deal with the U.S. known as the New START Treaty. Syrian media say government forces have blocked the way of a U.S. military convoy in the country's northeast, forcing it to retreat. Also ahead, Indian authorities reimposed some local lockdowns as coronavirus cases there near 800,000. Those were the top stories of just past 3:30 p.m. over here in Tehran. You're watching us live. This is Press TV. Welcome. Our top story, Russia says it is not optimistic about an extension of a nuclear arms control accord with the U.S. known as the New START Treaty. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the risks of nuclear confrontation have seriously increased recently. He also says Moscow is prepared to discuss control over new weapon systems with Washington. Russia and the U.S. signed the New START Treaty in 2010. The accord limits American and Russian deployments of nukes and will expire in February of next year. Russia has repeatedly voiced readiness to extend the treaty. However, the U.S. insists that China should also join talks. Beijing says it'll only sit down for such talks if the U.S. and Russia reduce their arsenals to a level comparable to that of China. Syrian government forces have blocked a U.S. military convoy at a checkpoint in the country's northeastern province of Hasaka. Syrian media say government troops forced the American vehicles to retreat from the area. There have been no reports of any confrontation between the two sides, but American forces and Syrians have clashed in Hasaka in the past months. In February, U.S. soldiers clashed with residents of two villages after they blocked the American convoy. A civilian was killed as a result. The U.S. has built military bases in and around the Syrian province of Hasaka, a move Damascus has described as illegal. The United States has rejected a UN report calling Washington's assassination of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani unlawful. Iran has described the killing as an international crime committed in absolute disregard for the UN Charter. Tehran says the coward move by Washington contradicts its claim of fighting terrorism. Take a look, please.
The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings has presented her findings about the U.S. assassination of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani to the Human Rights Council. Agnes Callamard has slammed as unlawful the killing caused by a U.S. drone strike near the Iraqi capital Baghdad on January the 3rd. The UN official has questioned Washington's justification for targeting Soleimani.
My report has an annex presenting a case study of the targeted killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, concluding that his was a violation of the UN Charter governing the use of force and an arbitrary killing. That is a significant and troubling new development. It is the first known incident in which a state invokes self-defense as justification for an attack against a government official outside a declared armed conflict.
Iran's UN ambassador in Geneva has also denounced Soleimani's murder as an international crime.
His assassination was brutal, arbitrary, unjust, and unlawful. It was an international crime of grave nature, threatening international peace and security too.
Other countries also condemned Soleimani's killing, with some calling it state terrorism. The U.S., however, rejected the UN report.
We reject the UN Special Rapporteur's spurious reports on targeted killings through armed drones in the case of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
Pompeo's comments drew a strong reaction from Iran, where the foreign ministry said the U.S. can't whitewash Soleimani's assassination by chastising the UN. Soleimani had earned a reputation as the most popular anti-terror military figure in West Asia. The Iranian general played a key role in eliminating Daesh in Iraq and Syria, the terror group President Donald Trump had confessed was created by the U.S. 5 days after Soleimani's assassination, Iran retaliated by firing missiles at an American military base in Iraq. According to U.S. officials, the Iranian attack left more than 100 American troops with traumatic brain injuries. Soleimani's killing also sparked calls in Iraq for the expulsion of American forces from the country, but the U.S. has so far defied those growing calls in an apparent attempt to maintain its military presence in Iraq.
An Iranian official has denied reports of a blast near the capital, Tehran. The reports had said the explosion happened in Quds town early on Friday, causing a massive power cut. The town's governor, Lida Vasseghi, that is, has dismissed those reports as rumors. Vasseghi has accused what she called the media of enemies of using fake accounts to spread such rumors. Now, a number of countries are stepping up precautionary measures to fight a resurgence of coronavirus cases. India has reimposed some local lockdowns as its infection cases are nearing 800,000. That is the world's third largest outbreak. A 9-day curfew began in the town of Aurangabad on Friday. A 2-day lockdown also took effect in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh. Hong Kong has ordered all schools to close from Monday, bringing forward the start that is of summer holidays. Australia says it'll slash the number of citizens returning to the country by half. Italy has banned travelers from more than a dozen countries it says pose a high risk of the coronavirus transmission. The United States has set a new one-day record of COVID-19 cases. Johns Hopkins University on Thursday said over 65,000 people contracted the disease in 24 hours. The figure marks the largest number of single-day infections by any country since the pandemic emerged in China in December. Coronavirus cases have been on the rise in 41 of 50 American states over the last 2 weeks. Intensive care units in several states, including Florida, have reached full capacity. The U.S. is the hardest hit country in terms of total infections and deaths from coronavirus. It has more than 132,000 fatalities out of over 3.1 million cases. Political commentator Danny Shaw says President Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic in the U.S. has been disastrous.
Yeah, no question. We saw in Tulsa, people were making fun of saying that the pandemic was a conspiracy theory, that late in the game. He has rallies scheduled coming up in New Hampshire. So it's politics as usual for Trump. We can see his narcissism, his arrogance. His eyes are on November, even though the polls have him being defeated by Biden by astronomical numbers. His handling of this public health crisis has been disastrous, yet he continues to go on his Twitter and gloat about how good the country is doing, and it's only because we've tested so much. And still a lot of people haven't been tested. And that number of 132,000 deaths is really a bit confusing, because how many people have died who were never tested? The ambulances didn't show up. They died isolated. They got to the hospitals too late. So the numbers 3.1 million and 132,000 deaths are really underestimates.
Stock markets have plummeted as the rising number of coronavirus infections worldwide dashes hopes for an economic recovery. European stock markets slid in opening trade on Friday, extending losses for a fourth day. Stocks in Germany and France shed less than 1%. Outside the zone, the Eurozone that is, London's benchmark FTSE dropped 0.5 point. Asian markets also dropped, with Tokyo, Hong Kong and Seoul each falling less than 1%. Shanghai shed over 1%. The losses followed a downtrend in U.S. stock markets, where the Dow dropped more than 1%. Hopes for an economic recovery have been dashed over a possible return of lockdowns, prompted by a surge in global coronavirus cases. Professor of Binary Economics Rodney Shakespeare says the collapse of global markets is not only due to the coronavirus pandemic. He says the outbreak is actually speeding up the failure of a malfunctioning economic system.
It's basically a situation where you have to say, well, what is the underlying reality? Now, the propaganda still says it's about the coronavirus. Yes, the coronavirus was the black swan, the unexpected, coming out of nowhere. But it was coming out of nowhere. The virus is the one in front of your face, isn't it? The one you see. But the underlying one is the true nature. The economy and all the propaganda, which always says everything is okay.
There are less than 4 months to America's November the 3rd election. As the presidential race in the U.S. heats up, the Democratic camp is trying to unite to better confront the incumbents. Let's watch this next report.
The 2020 U.S. presidential election is drawing close. Incumbent President Donald Trump is without a doubt determined to secure another term in the Oval Office in November. Many people, including former high-ranking officials close to Trump, believe he is obsessed with re-election, and this obsession forms the basis for most of his decisions. Trump so badly wants to win, and he has the powers of incumbency. Throughout American history, few presidents failed to secure a second term. But right now, things don't look the way Trump would have wanted. Trump's Democratic rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, is doing better in many polls just months before the vote. Everyone is wondering whether the 77-year-old is really up to the job of forcing the incumbent out of the White House. Over the past months, Biden has tried to unite different wings of the Democratic Party behind him. This week, the former vice president's campaign and allies of former progressive rival Bernie Sanders unveiled their joint approach to key areas such as the economy, education, healthcare, and immigration. The initiative is an effort to unite radical elements of the Democratic Party who supported Sanders and the party's centrists represented by Biden.
It is sort of a incrementally positive document. It does offer some progressive elements to it that Sanders supported, but by and large it's sort of the middle of the road.
The former vice president is trying to make sure that his party will not be divided when Americans go to the polls. Could this latest effort boost Biden's chances against Trump? The American president, too, will need unity in his Republican Party if he wants to keep the top job. But right now, Republican unity is something he seriously lacks.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump is a divisive man. He has not only divided the American society, but his own Republican Party. That has left Trump pretty vulnerable. As the big day approaches in the United States, Trump is finding himself not just fending off attacks by Biden, but a growing number of Republican critics. Some prominent Republicans have even pledged to vote for the former vice president. Now, Trump is grappling with big headaches right now. His poor handling of the coronavirus is perhaps his biggest weakness. That's being taken advantage of by the Democratic camp. But will Trump's core support base care at all? As you're about to see in this next report, the economic impact of the crisis could deal a major blow to Trump's re-election chances.
Trump's leadership has been chaotic from day one in office. He has made a long list of embarrassing blunders, but over the past months, his leadership skills were put to the most serious test of his presidency. Critics say his administration's sluggish response is to blame for the terrible spread of the coronavirus nationwide and the loss of tens of thousands of American lives. The Democratic camp is right now focusing most of its attacks against the White House on its poor handling of the coronavirus crisis. As new cases of infection surge across America, the U.S. president is finding it really tough to defend his performance.
People in the administration try to lie their way out of the evidence that's in front of everyone's eyes in the United States, that Trump's approach to COVID-19 has been an utter disaster. We have 135 to 140,000 dead already. By the time of the election, I would guess there would be maybe 200,000 dead. We have the largest number of deaths of any country in the world. And it's a horrible record that he has to run on.
The economic impact of the pandemic could make things tougher for the U.S. Commander-in-Chief. Economic devastation is perhaps the only thing that can hit Trump's core support base hard. Even the most die-hard supporters of Trump can't stand economic devastation in their local communities. Biden can beat Trump if he can show American voters that the chaotic handling of the COVID-19 crisis has led to the recession. The U.S. president must be hoping that the numbers will somehow rebound in the coming months so that he does not lose his last line of defense. Meanwhile, Trump is also under fire for his controversial comments and stances as racial divisions deepen in America. Polls show most Americans believe Trump has increased racial tensions in the U.S. Trump's approach has even alienated many prominent Republican figures, including former administration officials, with some of them now publicly backing Biden. Trump faces an uphill battle for re-election, but his aggressive tactics and unpredictability makes it hard to guess what happens in November.
Coronavirus keeps spreading across the Americas, infecting more people and claiming more lives. Brazil on Thursday reported more than 42,000 new cases, bringing its total to over 1.7 million. The country also recorded over 1,200 new fatalities, with its death toll now nearing 70,000. In Mexico, daily infections reached a new high with more than 7,000 cases. Deaths also increased by 700 to 33,000. Colombia has also seen a sharp rise in coronavirus cases and fatalities. In total, it has registered more than 125,000 cases and 4,500 deaths. The UN has warned of health and economic consequences of the coronavirus outbreak in Latin America. The Brazilian government is facing widespread criticism over its handling of the new coronavirus crisis. Now, political commentator Bruno Lima Rocha believes that the government has sacrificed health for the economy.
Helplessly, Bolsonaro is the right example of a lack of leadership. He refuses to be the president to combat the coronavirus. He also, for several months or weeks at least, denied the emphasis on coronavirus combat. And believe it or not, we still don't have a Ministry of Health. We still have a general, a 3-star general. He's not a doctor, in the place of a doctor as the head of the health ministry in Brazil. So we have a lack of leadership here. He said that to declare a lockdown would be more dangerous than to combat the coronavirus because he refused to deny his lack of leadership and his lack of a political economy. The Minister of Economy is a banker. He does not have nothing to do with production, of earning salaries, of establishing the wealth in Brazil. He only wants to accumulate the more richness for the richest. He's trying to establish in Brazil the Chilean version of Pinochet. That's why Bolsonaro refused to establish a lockdown, because if he did it in March, we would be safe now in July.
Now, authorities in Catalonia have imposed an order to wear face masks in public at all times as the region battles an uptake in the spread of the coronavirus. Press TV's Kusai Kedre is in Barcelona.
A new COVID-19 rule came into force in Catalonia Thursday, mandating the use of a face covering in public spaces for everyone aged 6 and older at all times and regardless of a previous clause that made it optional when a safety distance of 5 feet was maintained. Catalonia's President Quim Torra Wednesday announced the law as he pushed against criticism of his government's handling of the recent outbreaks that spread in a nursing home and among seasonal workers in the farming sector west of the region.
The mandatory use of masks will come into effect Thursday, irrespective of social distancing. Face masks will be mandatory across Catalonia.
The embattled regional president blamed the central government in Madrid for failing to legalize the seasonal workers, many of whom are undocumented immigrants whose poor living and working conditions made them prime targets of the disease. COVID-19 wary residents seem to acquiesce in the timeliness of the mask law.
This is good because of the many outbreaks we are seeing these days, especially among young people who tend to flout distancing.
People need to understand this is for the common good and safety of everyone.
The law exempts the wearing of the mask for people with breathing difficulties or for cyclists or joggers engaged in intense exercise, provided they keep distancing and avoid pedestrians. Some have voiced concern that the text of the law leaves gaping flaws, while others complained the €100 tickets in place for those who do not wear the mask will add to the economic distress of those people who can't even afford to buy masks. This nurse, who deals with COVID-19 patients from close, has a different take.
I agree that the penalties in place can lead to abuse by some in the police, particularly in the current context, but people often flout regulations when there is no deterrent.
This, as the number of deaths and infections continue to rise in Catalonia and across Spain. 257 confirmed cases were reported Wednesday by the Spanish Ministry of Health. While no one questions the validity of the impact of wearing a mask on saving lives and protecting the vulnerable, critics say the new law in its current form sows uncertainty and confusion and could lead to misconduct or abuse by those who are supposed to enforce it. Kusai Kadri, Press TV, Barcelona.
The U.S. state of California has sued the federal government over a policy that would prevent international students from staying in the U.S. unless they take in-person classes. The lawsuit has labeled the policy as unlawful, dangerous, and morally reprehensible. It says the White House policy could result in the further spread of the coronavirus. Nearly 100 members of Congress have also sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security urging it to rescind the policy. On Wednesday, Harvard and Massachusetts Institute of Technology also filed a lawsuit against the guidance the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement that has asked international students to leave the country or risk deportation if their universities switch to online-only courses. That's it for this broadcast. Visit us at our website, toldws.presstv.ir. I'll be back on top of the hour. That's in about 6.5 minutes with a reminder of this hour's top stories. Thank you.
We are in the Mexican state of Chiapas, home to one of the largest indigenous populations in the country. It is Mexico's most impoverished state.
Hoy, como pueblos mayas y mestizos, estamos pidiendo se respete nuestro derecho constitucional a manifestarnos.
Somos originarios de aquí, de nuestras tierras, y son nuestras tierras.
En el gobierno pues siguen queriendo impulsar las mismas políticas del siglo XIX, del siglo XX, es decir, el indigenismo, y los pueblos pues reclaman autonomías.
For generations, the indigenous population have demanded ownership of their own lands. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, wandering lonely in the breeze.
میوه قالب اینجا مخصوصا خوزستان کناره. نگاه بکنید این کناره بی‌نظیره. اینجا دقیقاً ابتدای ورودی جهانی کوهستانه. این آب رودخونه دزه که از پشت سد دز داره بیرون میاد و احتمالاً من با یه صحنه بسیار مهیج روبرو خواهم شد. بالاخره دارم به آخر کوه خرسان نزدیک میشم. اینجا آخر کوه خرسان و من صدای غرش رود دز رو میشنوم.
Mountains, valleys, hills, and vales. Make your journey full of tales. Iran Trotter, Kul Kherson.
Des photos? Oui. Ah, tu...
Pardon.
يا كل بلاد